Welcome to the Loco Fit Show. I'm your host, Lauren Conlon. Each week, we bring you the best insights in nutrition, mental health, habit building, training, and more. This week, I'm interviewing my friend, J.R. Simon, to dive deep into StrengthFinders and just understanding your strengths in general. Enjoy the show. Hello. Thank you so much for coming on our podcast, JR. I'm super excited for this.
I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So brief intro for everybody listening. I met you at the PEC in Dallas. So that was just recently. And immediately I was like, we're going to be friends. Like knew we were going to hit it off. And you had a really, really great talk. So for anybody who's not familiar, I'm not sure like what order we're doing the podcast. So Jeff's podcast might have come out, it might not have at this point. But Jeff Black, who I did interview, or if you haven't listened, I will interview. He's one of the founders of PEC, which is that big, kind of just conference that we do. And it's always really stemmed around, fitness and coaching and all those kind of deep dive topics. But we wanted to add more business stuff to it as well. So we added this year a few talks on like business and leadership. And you had one of the talks and I thought it was so great. And I had heard Jeff had told me about the StrengthFinder thing like before. And I was like, okay, like cool, like another personality thing, like whatever. And I kind of just wrote it off. And then I heard your talk and I was like, no, this is really cool. I should have listened to Jeff. So give a little background on yourself and then we'll get into it.
Sure, absolutely. So my background is actually in corporate project management. I've worked for Fortune 500 companies for 16 years. I also did government consulting, education consulting, a lot of consulting. So the business side of the equation. I have been doing StrengthFinder for about 13 of those years. And the reason that I really feel strongly about StrengthFinder is because it's something that's been a great tool for me in the corporate world to understand how people tick. In corporate world, especially, turnover is very expensive. And if someone's unhappy in their role because they're not fulfilled, something's not working, I usually take this quiz with them if they haven't already to see if there's a better role within the organization that will make them happy. So Jeff Black, as you mentioned, asked me to help kind of his gym, Iron House, get a little bit more of that understanding of who each of they are so that they could be in the right roles for his organization. And so I did some business consulting with him. We did StrengthFinder as a team, and he figured out he needed to move people into different roles. So for those of you that do know Jeff, and he talks a lot about Sarah Brown, who's his COO, we figured out very quickly that she is the person who makes things run. And we'll talk about each of the domains a little bit later, but he was able to figure out who on his team he needed to put in specific places to make his team run successfully. So I've been talking about this stuff for a long time, and I feel very passionately about it, and excited to share it with you some more.
Yeah, I had, like I said, Jeff told me about it. That was the only introduction I ever had. And then when I took it, I shared it on social media, and a lot of people were like, I wouldn't say like that many, but I would say about 20% of people were like, yeah, I've heard of it. And almost everybody had said I either took it like, in my corporate job, or I took it like in a collegiate type setting with like, sports or whatever. So like, it is something that has been around. I had just never really had any experience. And I think it's super interesting. And what I wanted to first touch on was just this idea of like focusing on strengths versus weaknesses. And this is not to say that you're avoiding your weaknesses, right? But it's about putting yourself in a position to where you are showcasing your strengths. So I want you to touch on that first before we get into this.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So StrengthFinder is all about focusing on your strengths. And what that means is if you are really exceptional in a strategic thinking domain, like you may have 2 or 3 of your top 5 strengths are in a strategic thinking domain, you need to be in more of that vision forming type of role, either in the fitness industry, business industry, whatever that looks like, of creating a vision. If you're more of the execution, you need to be the more day-to-day, getting things done. Here's my task list. Here's what I need to work through. And the reason is, it's not to say that you can't do the other. If you're really strong in strategic thinking, it doesn't mean you can't do execution. It just means you're going to really hate it. Where this has kind of come into play is in the fitness industry is knowing your clients, not just knowing yourself, but knowing your clients. So I have some trainers that I work with who are now giving their clients the test to figure out how their clients tick. Mm-hmm. So when you think about it that way, you may figure out that, hey, Lauren is a client of mine and we speak different languages. She's exceptionally talented in these domains. I'm in these other 2. we have no crossover, we're probably never going to work. But my peer totally is in her domains, and maybe I should partner her with them because they're going to be a lot more successful, right? So we think about it from a team aspect. Yeah, okay, I got more clients, but if half of them don't want to work with me because they can't connect with me, they're going to leave. But if we're on a team, we can put them over here and they're more successful. That's going to keep clients engaged. So that's something that, it's not to ignore your weaknesses. It is to think about your strengths and partner your strengths. One of the things also is you want to make sure you have a mix of all 4 domains on a leadership team. So the 4 domains: executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. If you have everybody that's a strategic thinker in your group, nothing's ever going to get done, and everybody's got ideas, and it just feels like shiny objects all the time. Like, ooh, that's new and cool, let's all do that. Oh, then there's another new thing, but nothing actually ever got done. So you want to have a balance of all 4 domains across people so that you have everything covered. I talked about it at the TEC, or the PEC, excuse me. There was an individual that I worked with in England who, he was such an exceptional seller. He was an influencer to the T. And he was talking to me about his business. And by the time he was done in his little 3-minute spiel about what he does, I said, he could sell dirt and I'd buy it, because that's who he is. But he admits, I'm not an executor. I pass that to my business partner. She closes the deals. I sell it. She closes it. That's self-awareness that he's like, that's not my strength. That's her strength. I'm gonna partner her with these people to get this stuff done. So it's really understanding that and knowing also your peers, because when you get to do this enough, you start to recognize who people are, right? Like I can look at people and go, here's where they're really strong. So it's a really cool tool.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And a lot of times people will, when they do talk about like, don't focus on your weakness, right? They're talking about stuff that like nobody wants to do, right? It's like, oh, well, I'm not good at that. It's like, I'm not good at like end of the month spreadsheets. Well, nobody is, right? Like nobody really, there might be some people who really like that, right? But like generally speaking, even the most like diligent, organized person, like I am totally like that. I'm still not like excited to do payroll and stuff like that, but it has to get done. So it's like, it's not about saying, okay, avoid doing things that like you just don't want to do and hire somebody out for everything, but it is saying, okay, especially if you are creating a team or have anything in a one-on-one capacity. Okay, am I better suited for this role? Is this person, like one thing I always talk about, like I am not a video editor at all. Like the whole editing process of that. And I have like a vision of how I want things to look, but like the actual filming process, I'm not even that great at it, right? So anything like with that kind of component is a hard no for me. Could I learn how to do it? Certainly.
Of course.
But it's like, am I much better at other things? And I have a girl on my team, Danielle, who actually edits all the podcasts and puts together things, like loves that. Why would I not have her do that? You know what I mean? Because it's like, correct, if I'm in charge of it, I'm not going to do it at all. Or I'm going to do it kind of poorly and like bitch about it and then not get other stuff done that I could be good at. Whereas she's like, no, I love video editing. Like, let's do more of this. Like, can you film this? Can you do that? Right? So she has that vision and she has that execution there, whereas I have it in other areas. So it is about knowing yourself. And it's, you have to take that honest assessment. Some people, there's like kind of, I feel like people are very one or the other. They're like, I'm not good at anything, or they're like, I'm good at everything. And it's like, okay, you have strengths. You might not have discovered them yet, but you definitely have them. Or you maybe are in a position to where you're not using those strengths, which is why you feel like you're not good at anything. But then also you're not good at everything, right? So like you can be pretty good at stuff, but you really need, and there are people who have all 4 of these, right? And like an individual person has all 4. So you can have different areas that, you're good at, but let's dial it in a little bit and say, okay, you don't need to take on everything. That's your ego, right? Other people can do this. It might not be exactly how you want it right away, but you can, teach people and all that. So yeah, I really like that idea.
And you touched on a great point. There are some people, I am one of those people, that have all 4 domains. Okay.
Like, I'm pretty much
not
amazing.
A good thing. Well, so people are like, that's amazing. And it's like, yes and no. The way I describe it is, I'm a jack of all trades, but a master of none. I feel like some days I can't do anything. Like, I don't know how I got anything done today, right? But because I have all 4 domains, I can speak to anyone in all 4 domains, right? So that's something that a lot of people have a misconception on, of like, oh, you've got all 4, you can do everything. I don't want to do those things. It means I can, but I don't want to, right? Mm-hmm. So it's funny you touched about that, because I call it the unicorns. There's a unicorn of all 4 domains, but it's still like, eh.
Is that the top 5 or the top 10?
In the top 5, I have all 4 domains.
Damn. Okay. I have my 6th is actually makes up the 4th, but everything else is kind of a combo. But yeah, so before we go into mine and other stuff, let's dive into each group. I know we touched on a little bit, but okay, so executing, influencing, relationship, strategic. Like, what are each of those? So
executors are the people who get things done, right? They are the people that you need to actually accomplish a goal. So they know how to make things happen, right? They're not just an idea generator. They're like, here's what we need to do. Here are the steps we need to do. Project managers are really good executors, right? I got to do X, Y, and Z to make this project considered done. So office managers, COOs, like operating officers of companies, are really good executors, usually. Influencers are your sales people. They can sell. It's not just selling, it's also connecting on a level where they feel like you're invested, right? So, like I said, the person I talked to in England who was just such a good seller, I mean, he had me enthralled with his story, because he knows how to connect on that level. It's knowing your audience.
If you've met those people, you know exactly, like when we're saying this, like there are people who are coming to my mind who I'm like, oh my gosh, like anything I could buy from them. Like I'm invested 100%.
Absolutely. And that's what you need. You need people like that on your team, because how else do you get things sold? How else is anybody going to buy anything, right? So the influencers kind of help with that thing. The relationship builders are your customer service. They are your engagement. They're keeping people satisfied. They're making sure that they have what they need. You know, people who don't have relationship building, empathy tends to be a little low. It's just the truth, right? If they don't have any relationship building, empathy is a little like, oh, you're whining? I don't care. But if empathy, you've got someone that relationship building, at least one of them, it's like, okay, what can I do to make this better? Like, is something wrong? Did I do something? Can we fix it? Right? So relationship builders are making sure that there's that strong connection. There's a greater purpose that everybody's kind of feeling. And then your strategic thinkers are your visionaries, right? They're the people casting the ideas, creating these awesome things, making sure that like this company is going to have 27,000 new ideas in the next year. And then they pass it to the rest of the team to get stuff done. But they understand how to cast that vision. So Steve Jobs is a great example of someone who was a strategic thinker, right? He imagined that we were all going to have iPads. I'm talking to you on an iPad right now. He came up with this thing that we all said, we are never going to need it. And everybody has one, right? He created something we all had to have. Now, he was not a relationship builder. He tended to burn people really badly, right? So you can look at the types of things that people are and understand about who they are. So those visionaries, one of the things that I like to focus on here is there's one strength in there that talks about they're a sponge. They're always learning. There's a knowledge that is continually being soaked in. And Jeff Black, you mentioned, is one of those people where he reads so many books a year. Like there are days when I'm like, I don't even know how he has time to read, but he like reads a billion books. But he also likes giving it back out. So it's that sponge effect, right? He's learning all the time, the learner in him. But he's also like, look at these fantastic ideas you could do in the fitness industry and casting them out there. And people are like, oh, okay, I can get behind that. All right, I see that vision. So that's the 4 domains that kind of exist within StrengthFinder.
Yeah, I think it's, so we kind of, how we said before, like, if you have all of these, you're probably like a jack of all trades, right? And it's something that I've just noticed, like knowing and either studying really successful people or knowing really successful people. And this is not a knock on them at all, but people who are really, really ultra successful in one area typically have that figured out backwards and forwards. But then if you look kind of behind the curtain, you tend to see some other things that maybe aren't the best, right? Which is not to say that that's not what they want, right? But like there's other things that are kind of falling apart while this other thing is like so big. You know, Steve Jobs is a great example, right? Like, you know, obviously everybody has iPhones, MacBooks, iPads, right? But like, was he known for his relationship building and his empathy? I don't think so. I haven't really studied him too well, but from everything that I've ever heard, that's a no.
It was not.
Yeah. So and it's like, is that right, wrong? I don't know. But it always seems that the people who are really, really strong in one area seem to be lacking in another. But to the point of this conversation, it's like, all right, maybe that's some personal stuff he could have, you know, self-developed a little bit. But he had a whole team to, you know, to make Apple so successful. So it's like it still worked out in his favor. But if you were to say, hey, you need to be a, you know, executor, he would have been like, nah, fuck off. Or a relationship builder. You know what I mean? Like clearly that's, you know, why he was in the position that he was. So I think it's just interesting. And like one thing that I've dove into so much is like the big 5 personality traits. And like, I basically view everything through that lens, you know, because it really is like at the core of everybody's personality. And like kind of how you said, you know, you can use this with clients and stuff. I don't even really need to have to ask people anymore. You know, I mean, obviously I just do out of interest, but I can just talk to people for a few times and be like, all right, I kind of have an idea of where you are here, which is good because then it's like, all right, if you're a little bit more introverted, right? Obviously I'm super extroverted. You might find my communication style a little much, right? So I need to tone this back. Or if you're, you know, a little bit more neurotic, okay, I can't say things this direct. I might need to kind of go around it a little bit versus, right? Like, so there's all these different things. Or if you're somebody who's very low in agreeableness, like I have to be strong with you because you're going to push back on me. So I just think that all this stuff is so interesting and it's going to help no matter if this is your business, your personal life, just like your day-to-day life, you know, like you can just like, I think once you have a deeper understanding of people and their personalities and their strengths, you're able to like navigate the world a little bit easier. Like I started to see people in a way that wasn't like, oh, I don't understand why they would think this. It's like, no, we're just different. And like, this person is 100% different than me. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. It's just kind of, they're different and this is how they're seeing it, which is probably why we're kind of butting heads here, or maybe we don't agree. It's not a knock on them. So it's really helped me like have better people skills, I think, over the past 2 years, which in my position is obviously incredibly important with a team of coaches and obviously working with clients on a one-on-one basis, et cetera. So, which
100%.
Yeah, which you'll not be surprised at my strengths then.
I already have guesses. Go ahead. Hit me.
Okay. My first one is input. My second one is learner. So 2 strategic, but like learning focused ones. Third is restorative. Fourth is individualization. And then 5th is responsibility. So.
Okay. All right.
And then my next ones, it goes competition, focus, harmony, intellection, and discipline.
So I have to admit, I'm a little surprised.
Really?
I expected a little influencing.
I know. Sam was like, you're a woo through and through. One of my coaches, Sam. And I was like, okay, but then it wasn't. But it's also like, you know, you take the test under your impression of yourself. So maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, so that's a really good caveat. Let's caveat that for a second. So if anybody's listening to this who hasn't taken the test yet, bring your whole self to the test. The reason I say that is because a lot of times people will take the test and go, my employer gave me the test. I need to answer how my employer might want me to. Or I'm doing this for my boyfriend, girlfriend, significant other, and I want to answer to make them happy of what the answer is. Don't do that. No. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Don't take it on a bad day.
Don't take it on a bad day. Don't take it when the kids are running around and you take it, it's 30 to 45 minutes, depending on how long you take it in one sitting and answer as a whole person. And the reason I say is because if you don't answer as a whole person, when you go to work and you say, here are my strengths, and they go, great, you should be in this role. And you get there and you go, I hate this. I hate this job. Like, oh my God, what am I doing here? Why am I here? But if you answer as a whole person, then it feels like, oh, they put me in something that I actually am going to enjoy. Because while we do have personal lives and work lives, the person that you are should be the same.
Yeah.
right? Same person.
Oh, for sure.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that that's something that a lot of people are like, my boss gave this to me, so I need to answer how my boss wants me to answer this. No. Answer how you are as a person. So
yeah. And
but
to
yeah, I
be fair,
expected
the next three are all influencer, like 11, 12, and 13.
okay, so you're barely there. Okay,
So
all
I'm
right.
like,
But I expected influence in the top 5. So okay, all right. So
I'm
so
a real
speaking
nerd.
about,
Maybe I hid that.
maybe you are. Okay, well, we'll talk
Oh,
about that later.
I'm a super nerd. Like when I read through the input and the learner stuff, I was like, oh my God, like collecting ideas and archiving information just for the sake of doing it. And I was like, oh my God, that is so me.
So you're the sponge. The learner is the sponge, right? The learner is, the way they describe it is a great desire to learn and want to continuously improve.
Yeah, like
The
that's my
metaphor is
favorite
that
thing.
you are yes to learning curves and no to learning plateaus.
Yes, I love, like, I can literally, I'll be in a conversation, I'll just start spitting off random things to people and they're just like, okay. And some people are also interested in that. And other people are like, bro, I don't care. Like, like stop talking about dopamine, like relax.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, cool. Thanks for being a nerd and let's move on. Yeah. I mean, the input is the same, right? Talented input is craving to know more. They're always going to collect and archive all this information so that you can feel like when you talk, you know exactly what you're talking about. There's no ambiguity. You've got all the facts, you've got all the data, and you speak with conviction about it because you know it.
Oh yeah, that's definitely what I strive to be. You know, I'm not always right, obviously, but I very much want to be correct. And if it is wrong, then I want to update it and all that. So yeah.
Well, and that's where, you know, that's something that's, you know, world we live in. We have phones at our fingertips that we can Google anything, right? But the internet is not always right.
No.
So you speak with conviction. You're like, dopamine is a great example where you're speaking about it and you know about it. And someone says, well, I saw on the internet it says something different. It's like, okay, well, hold on a minute. What's your source? Like, you're the type of information, you're the type of person that, like, when you get a piece of information, you go and verify it through 4 sources to make sure that it is validly true. So that when you speak about it, you know it's right. And I think that's where we get messed up in society. And we need people like you who are speaking the truth about things, right? I know for a fact, because I've verified it through all these sources, here's how dopamine works. It's not because one website told me one thing that is so crazy that nobody believes.
Yeah, to the best of my ability, I try to relay the most factual things. And
100%.
it's one of those things that is always evolving, right? Like, especially our understanding when we're talking about science and body and mindset and psychology and all of that. But yeah, there's nothing that bothers me more than people who just kind of talk out of their ass. And you're like, and now that is a skill. That, I don't know what strength that is, but whew, there are some people who you're like, I'm like, I know that this isn't right. But the way that you are speaking about this, like, you are just pulling this out of nowhere, but like your delivery.
So what domain do you think that is?
Definitely influencing.
100%.
I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like, I know this is incorrect, but like people are going to listen to those people because of how they're saying it, which is so powerful. And in the right hands, that's awesome. In the wrong hands, that, you know, can lead people obviously
it's dangerous
down a wrong path.
And that's where, you know, especially in the personal training industry, you know, there are people who will come to you and they are so screwed up because they read something on the internet that told them to do this thing. And then you're like, oh my gosh, it's gonna take 6 months to fix you because you read some crazy ass crap. And that's the society we live in. It's dangerous. It's this dangerous society where if somebody tells you something that is so inaccurate, it could kill you. I mean, it 100% could kill you.
So that is certainly something that's where people, you know, like myself, get a little aggravated with all of that. But yeah, and then the individualization one, when I looked into that, that made a lot of sense with, you know, kind of having a team and being able to see like different people's strengths and like put them in different places, right? Which I thought was like a unique one, but I was like, oh, okay, like I do see myself doing that, you know, like, okay, this person's good at this and that person's better at here. And that took me a while that's definitely a skill that I've honed in on. Maybe it's always been there, but I've definitely honed in on that. I would not say that that was a like natural skill right out the gate, probably.
So these little cards that I have, it talks about, so there's a metaphor image associated with each of them. So the metaphor image associated with individualization is that you are a casting director using your intelligence about people.
Ooh, I like that.
Right? Because what you're doing is saying, he's great here, put him here. He's fantastic here. She is so great here. We're going to put this right here. The casting director.
Huh. Casting. Oh my gosh, I like that. Okay.
It's your new tagline. It's your new tagline. I'm a casting director.
I'm a casting director. They're like, for what? I'm like, don't, no more details. I'm just going to be ambiguous about what it is. You'll see the project soon. And then, yeah, the other two, it was restorative was 3, and then responsibility was 5. So those are the, the executing type ones, and which makes.
Yeah. So responsibility means you take things very seriously, right? You're very much a serious owner. You bring dependability and reliability. You need that freedom to take the ownership, right? The restorative is, you hate the idea that a problem will disappear if it's ignored, because it doesn't. Problems don't disappear if they get ignored. You have to deal with them. You love finding the solution, right? You thrive on finding that solution. Let's reflect back to the conversation we had about someone coming to you and read something on the internet and they're broken because they've screwed themselves up with something. You love to be like, okay, here's the plan. We're going to get you back in shape. We're going to get your body levels normal, your blood checked. We're going to do all these things. And you love to find that solution. And you get extreme satisfaction when you see that it works.
100%.
Extreme satisfaction.
Yeah, which makes sense. I think this all kind of does make sense as far as like being a coach and all of that. Yeah, definitely. Like some of my other ones were more of the influence related, but then my bottom ones were all of the like relationships.
So it's funny that your friends thought you were a woo. I can see that. So I'm a woo, so I can talk about why woos are so great, right? The way I describe woos is that we have never met a stranger, right? You and I met in Texas. We had never met before. And after 5 minutes, we both were like, yeah, I'm keeping you. Like, just so we're clear, I'm keeping you. We're going to talk. We're going to do things. We're going to spend time together. Like, immediately. And it's like like I said, we've never met a stranger. We love to invest. We're socially fast and outgoing. To the point you made, it's like we were like, oh, we're best of friends. Let's keep going. We're good. Exactly. And so woos are very valuable when you think about creating social networks, because we bring people together and we engage and we keep people talking. I mean, you probably remember from the session, Jeff is a very charismatic speaker and he speaks very strongly and he's very impactful, but he stands in one place because that's how he is. Jamie did a great job. Jamie moved a little bit. I convinced her to move a little bit more, but you saw me going, hey, you, tell me your answer. Hey, you, tell me your answer. And walking into the crowd and turning left and turning right. Like, I'm keeping that engagement going because that's just who I am as a person. So.
No, those are definitely they're all just so interesting. And I think to the larger point of this is that regardless if this is just for yourself or if you do have a business, understanding these things is really, really key, because you'll find yourself, and this is where, as I learn more about myself and, as I get older and all of that and have more experiences, like I recognize like, okay, these things are really important for me. Like I didn't think they should be important. And now I realize that they are, right? Like for me, because I'm super extroverted, I really enjoy traveling. I really enjoy going new places. I can go places by myself. I have zero problem doing that. I can talk to people. I cannot talk to people. I can just observe. Like I am all here for that. You know what I mean? But if I don't do that and I'm like, I feel super stuck, right? Like I'm somebody who like, as I've gotten older, like I need to do that. I need to have those experiences. I need to go out and like be in the world, which is so ironic because I run an online business, right? And that's where I think it like pushed me to realize like, okay, I have to balance this, because otherwise I'm on this or this all day. And it literally makes me feel crazy. And I'm just not happy. And it's not that I don't love my clients and I don't love what I do. I absolutely do. But there has to be a balance for me, because otherwise it's just like, I'm not, I guess using my strengths, right? And it's like, actually, I'm not using my strengths if I'm just behind here, because I'm not great on, I'm not bad on camera, but there's definitely people who like enjoy it more, right? Like I would much rather be in person, where the idea of that to some people is absolutely horrifying. And I'm like, no, I'd much rather do this. I'd much rather have an in-person thing. And just because I can talk to people and navigate all that. So I think that this is just important for you to recognize for both your professional life and your personal life, to just be more fulfilled in general. And I think that there's, I recognize that about myself, but I'm not like, oh, I'm going to change the business, like going to leave all my clients behind. Like, well, obviously we're not going to do that. You know what I mean? But it's like, okay, how can I integrate other things? Okay. Doing in-person events, going and traveling and meeting up with clients, or doing different things, or just going and traveling on my own, and just, I'm still working, but I'm able to like experience stuff. Like that's really cool. And then part of me, like I can just share information with people who might want to hear it. Maybe they don't, but I can pick up on it if they don't want to. Like, okay, yeah, sure.
She's a little too passionate about this, but
yeah.
cool. Got it.
I literally heard that one time when I was at, it was really funny, but I anyways, long story. But if you are, say you are building a team, right? And say you take this and you are, like, obviously, you have every aspect, I have a few in each, so most people are probably going to be a blend. It's probably rare to find somebody. Now, there's definitely going to be people who are in one category only, but you're still going to have your own strength, even if you have all the categories.
Yep.
So how would you suggest going about building a team, or just kind of surrounding yourself, maybe you don't have that option, but like surrounding yourself with the right types of people, or how would you just navigate, I guess your weaknesses and your strengths?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that, the best way to describe that is, if you have two people in a business and they're both strategic thinkers, let's say they've got strategic thinking and relationship building and influencing. So they could sell an idea, they create the idea and they can sell the idea. There's no one getting things done. That means nothing ever does get done. There's all these ideas. And if you're a client of these two people, you're going, well, they've told me a lot of fantastic things, but I've seen zero results. What am I actually getting for my money? Right?
So, or, oh, I didn't get the program, or like this billing thing didn't go right. Like all the logistics.
Exactly. The logistics. Like, I mean, when we talk about building a business, Jamie Flyer does a great job of doing this. And she talks about how you can systemize so much of this for people that aren't great at the influence or the executing domain, right? Like, how do you set it up where the billing is happening and stuff like that? But people who don't have execution don't go and monitor it, right? One day they'll be like, oh, my checking account's low. Why is my check low? Oh, well, none of the bills went out. Well, your clients are probably excited because they didn't have to write the check this month, but you got to get paid. So you got to surround yourself with people who are executors, who make sure that the bills went out and things were getting done and schedules are made and the follow-ups are done and they're getting their diet plans and check. So to answer your question about building a team, is knowing your current team and knowing where maybe you're lacking and trying to find someone that can fulfill those domains. Because like we said, you could go and look and make sure that the bills are done and the schedule's done and people got their diet plans, but you're like, I hate this. But you may find someone who is like, these are the things that I thrive on. Don't ask me to come up with some grand idea because I just can't do it. But if you give me my to-do list, I'm running, see ya. And, when you build that type of rapport and trust, you can literally turn it over to them and be like, hey, this is done, go do that. And they come back to you and said, everything you needed done is done. You don't have to verify it, you don't have to check it, because you trust them and you know that they thrive on it and they got it done, right?
Yeah.
We talk about, we talked a little bit about Jeff and Thera. I mean, Jeff has literally turned the entire Iron House gym over to Thera. It's like, okay, you got this. Let me know when you need me. Effectively, it's like, hey, Jeff, we need to spend $1,000 on this. He's like, okay, that's it. Otherwise, she takes care of all of it because he trusts her to do it. And that's what she's strong at. And he's strong at Crest and the vision. They split apart. They come together for meetings. Here's the updates. Cool. Thanks. See you. Bye. So when you're building a team, is making sure that you've got try to get all 4 domains supported and represented. And, we talked about people who have all 4, like myself, don't have everybody that has all 4, because again, we're jack of all trades and masters of none. I can create a vision. I can get the vision done. I can sell it. And afterwards I'm like, I'm tired, right? I'm tired. But someone who's strategic thinking can literally, you could probably relate to this as a strategic thinker. You could come up with new ideas all day, every day, and not be tired of it. Because it's who you are. It's who you are as a person. I know you're shaking your head, but still, like you could, yeah. But it is that it's the ability to create that vision and do those things. And so making sure that you've got the balance, because if you've got all executors, your business is stale. Nobody's creating new things. Nobody's moving it forward, right? So it's making sure you got those balances.
I think for me, it's pretty clear here. Like I'm kind of half and half, right? And then I kind of have that one relationship thing in there, but that really is how I feel. I feel like there's days where I'm like, just execute. Like I'm just doing it. And when I'm in that mode, I can't see the bigger picture, right? I can't see that 10,000 foot view because I'm in it. But then the other days that I'm not in that, right? I am strategically thinking, I'm like kind of visionary and all this stuff and dreaming about things and whatever, right? But then when I'm in that mindset, I can't do the other execution stuff. So I've had to, I'm, still trying to work it out, the best of my ability, but I try to say, okay, there's some days that are really heavy execution, other days that are heavier on the strategic thinking, et cetera. And just really kind of creating that space for me to actually do it, to say, hey, I'm going to carve out this time to do that. Or like, hey, I got to do end of the month stuff. Like that is all execution, right? But like, I have to be in the right mindset to like not mess that up. Or like client stuff, like that's all execute.
Very much so.
Okay. Want to move forward with all of this. Okay. Like where's the business going to go? I can just get go. And then I'm like, oh gosh, I have no more brain power to like be creative and strategic. So I have to create that time. But then when I allow myself to go there, it just kind of floods in. So for me, it's like, I have to balance those things. And I think most people will probably find themselves kind of in like a struggle like that with certain things. So in that situation, really try to give yourself that time, or even figure out activities that allow you to do that. Like when I'm walking, like I talk about walking all the time, and people are probably like, shut the fuck up about walking, but there's so many benefits with walking. But one of the best things that I've actually just seen is literally just completely like unplugging and like just walking and not really thinking, but then letting things kind of come to my mind, and something keeps playing over and over again. Then I'm like, oh, that's an idea. Then here this comes, and it allows me to like actually think and like at this like slow pace. And it's just super interesting. Or like the sauna, I feel like I can think for whatever reason in the sauna, because it's like, that's a cue for me. Like I walk in there, I sit, I'm really not supposed to be doing anything else. I'm just kind of thinking and letting thoughts kind of rumble around, and then it'll eventually sort itself out. Recently I've started to incorporate floating. It's another really good, like I have to create almost like cues for myself. Like, okay, like this is a cue. We're going to go here, and you're going to give your brain time to like rattle around and think for this amount of time, and something good might come out of it. And maybe nothing does, but generally it has. So I think for anybody listening, like if you are feeling like there's like an internal pull somewhere, you might just need to, organize or change your time a little bit and allow yourself to go into those modes. Because I know for me, like I said, if I'm in execution mode, I'm super overwhelmed, and I can only do that. I can't just flip flop.
You can't switch ideas that quickly. Yeah. And some people can.
Yes, some people can. But I can't.
That's more of a trait, right? That's more of traits. We talk a little bit about in StrengthFinder, and especially in the session, we talk about how trait deficits are not the same as weaknesses. Because a weakness is something that you cannot really control. A trait deficit you can control. I'm like, let's use an example of I'm an influencing domain, but I suck at selling. You got the basics, let's just work on your flow. That's a trait, right? But that's where I think there's a really good distinction to call out, is like knowing where a skill is absent versus who you are helps balance that. Because there's a lot of people who will say, I cannot complete a task for the life of me. Okay, well, you've got an influencing domain. What is the reasoning? Well, I just don't really understand it. Okay, that's a trait. Let's give you a skill. Let's teach you that. And then they're like, off and run it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's good to call that out. You know, people can switch like that.
Oh, for sure.
You know that about yourself. You can't.
Mm-hmm.
It's just who you are. So, but you also know, here's what I need to do in order to stay focused in that area.
Yeah. And even like looking at like the bottom, like my lowest one is like adaptability. And I think anybody who knows me would laugh. I'm not very adaptable. I try, but it is not my strong suit. I am like the most over deliberation, like overthinker, like I will like to the death. I think partly because it's like, I want to be right or correct, right? So it's like, okay, let me think of all these 18 ways and then like, but that's a big struggle in business because you have to be adaptable because shit's always changing. So it's something that I've had to try and get better on, but it's like, that's never going to be, I've just accepted that is not my strong suit. I am not going to be the person who's like, let's just go with the flow and do that. Not me. But yeah. I can have other people around me who are good at that, right? And I can also be realistic with like, how can I bring that up for myself in certain ways. So yeah.
So I want you to change your terminology for yourself. Okay. So you're talking about adaptability.
Like, is this a therapy session?
This is a therapy session. Did you not know StrengthFinder is also therapy? It kind of is. Jeff will tell you that too. He's like, there are times when you talk to me and I'm like, am I in therapy? Should I be paying more for this? Yeah, I should be billing more per hour. But you know, you got to think about it from a perspective of it's not your strength.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that you suck at it. It's not that you're terrible at it.
True.
It's not your strength.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where this plays into is it's like, don't say I completely suck at that. That's not my strength. That's not my skill set. That's not where I thrive.
Yeah, that's kind of that like negative or positive mindset. You know, like if you say, hey, I'm so bad at this and you have all that negative self-talk, like we know what that does to really every aspect of your life, right? And I mean, you can't fake it till you make it, right? Like you have to have some skills in certain areas, right? Like you have to be realistic about it, but how you speak to yourself and about things really does make it like all the difference in the world, obviously.
Absolutely about how you view things, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, about me, you know, Jamie Flyer talks about anxiety a lot, and I suffer from it too. One of the things that I'm the worst at is I think worst case scenarios. Oh, I'm always like the worst case scenario. Like, yeah, I'm going on a plane for 7 hours this weekend, and it's like, oh my gosh, 7 hours on a plane. Like, what if something happens? And it's like, okay, hold on. The plane is substantially safer than driving in the car down the street. Yep. Substantially. And I have to remind myself of those things. I follow a really well-known pilot on Instagram, and he talks about turbulence on an airplane. And he says, turbulence is merely a passenger comfort issue. That's all it is. I like that. He says the plane is designed to go with the air. That's exactly what it's designed to do. Otherwise, when it hits a block of air, it's going to go clunk, right? It's designed that way. And so when I'm in a plane and things are getting turbulent, you're going, oh, and I go, it's just my comfort. Just my comfort. And so that's why it's changing that mindset. Like to your point, you're just making, you're like changing this to be more positive. It's just a comfort issue. Okay, it's a little bumpy. Let me just watch my television show. Hopefully drink my glass of champagne and keep myself happy, right? Yeah, there's a great study. I've referenced this so many times, but it's one of the most remarkable studies. They took a group of housekeepers who did not think that they were physically active, right? They were not exercising outside of this, whatever, but they were like, hey, you know, what you're doing actually qualifies as physical activity, and like educated them on the benefits of like what they're doing is fulfilling those needs, et cetera, et cetera. They did like a 20-minute seminar and put some flyers up. Within a month, the group of housekeepers who reported to not change their diet, alcohol, exercise, anything like that, reduced their blood pressure, lost inches off their waist, like legitimately changed their body composition with zero change besides they now recognize like, oh, what I'm doing is actually like exercise. And not that like, oh, I'm so tired after my day, I can't go do anything. They're just like, no, I'm actually getting things done. And it was one of the most remarkable studies. Obviously it was short term and it wasn't like something that was that substantial, but literally goes to prove how important your mindset is with
quite literally everything. So
Yes.
yeah, it is. You're right. That's a good reframe. I will reframe that.
Yeah,
Is that
Jamie
my
Fowler, when she
tongue
Jamie
sleep?
Fowler, when she talks about it, I'm always like, she's right. Anxiety, don't let it cripple you. Don't let these things cripple you. Don't let that talk to you. And that's exactly what it is. You know, it's not letting that thing, it's the positive reaffirmation that like everything's gonna be okay.
Mhm.
Everything's good.
All good.
It's
All worries.
temporary bumps. To the plane analogy, it's temporary bumps.
Yeah, just a slight discomfort.
Yeah.
Well, this was really insightful. I'm excited that we went through this. Is there anything else you want to add that you think is just like, I feel like we touched on a lot.
No, I think, like I said, you know, if people decide they want to take this, which I highly encourage people to do it, there's like the data around this stuff is so fantastic. And I think it's 24 million people have taken this test. Like there's so much data out there about this stuff. Come as a whole person, take the time to do it, and really embrace who it is. And I think, you know, for those that are listening, if they have a corporate job or a job where they're working for somebody, even a boss of the training industry, tell them, here are my strengths. And here are the areas where maybe my job is not working for me. I think there's a lot of fear, talking back to anxiety, there's a lot of fear of sharing that because you're like, I'm going to get fired. I'm going to like, something's not going to work, right? And if you work for someone that's really invested in you, they're going to go, okay, let's change some things so that you are fulfilled and happy in your role. And, you know, as someone who has direct reports, there are times when I have had to say, I would much rather you tell me you're unhappy and let me try and fix it than you quit. It cost me as an individual manager so much more time and effort to replace you than if I had just shifted your role a little bit and given the pieces you didn't like to someone else who really does thrive in it. That would have been a very easy fix for me, but instead you quit because you weren't communicating to me what you needed. You know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's true. We have to communicate our needs in a work, in a relationship, in a training. You know, Jeff will tell you as his client, there are times when I'm like, I'm not doing that. That is not going to work for me. Or I need this. And he'll make fun of me a little bit about it, but I'm communicating my needs. So, you know, as you think about this, it's making sure you understand those things and say, look, I am really great at executing, but I hate strategic thinking. Great. So as a coach, you can say, I'm going to give you step-by-steps. You're going to do this step this week, this step next week, this step the week after. Because if you cast a vision to them, they're going to go, too big, don't understand it, way too much, never going to happen. Break it down into steps. When you break down the steps, they're more likely to do it.
And vice versa, right? If somebody is a big strategic
Correct.
thinker and you're like, here's
Sell the
what we're
vision.
going to do. Yeah. Then they're going to be like, this is boring. This isn't going to work. This isn't what I want to really be doing. That's a really great point.
Yep.
Would
And
you
when
say
it's your
that
point,
most people
ahead.
fall within more executing or strategic? Like, is there any kind of statistics on like what the norms are, or is that not a thing?
So the most common domain is executing.
Okay.
The most common theme is achiever.
Okay.
Okay. So achievers are hardworking people. They complete tasks. That is the most common theme. So there's a contrast here that's really interesting. So since you're intellection, right? Or your individualization, I'm sorry, wrong one. But if someone has intellection, that's like they're intense thinking, and achiever is intense diligence. Like intense diligence, like do. Where an intellection's an intense thinker. So
yeah,
that's the most common theme, most common domain. The least common domain is influencing.
that makes sense.
It's the least. So, you know, I talked a little bit of my talk that it's weird that I have two, right? I have two in the influencing domain. I'm like, but I don't feel like I could sell anything. But one of the things I realized many years ago about myself is I embraced that. I was working for a university here in Nashville, and I hate the sound of my voice. I know that I hate the sound of my voice. I go through drive-thrus and they go, is that all, ma'am? Not kidding. They really do. So I was like, I don't want to talk in front of people. And I quickly figured out, I was like, I'm not afraid of that. put me in front of people and I presented on a new student record system. And so, I mean, I sold the crap out of it. Nobody else on my team wanted to stand up there like, I'll do it. I don't care. And I embraced who I was and learned those things about myself. So it's really, like I said, understanding that. But, you know, when you think about the domains, if you've got that influencing domain, figure out how to use it, because it's so rare. It is rare.
It really is. Because like, as we were talking about this and, you know, saying, hey, there's these people that I'm thinking of, there's only a handful of people that I'm thinking of, right? It's not like I'm thinking of 20 people that I know. It's a few. And so I think that it is kind of like a superpower almost that will set you apart, but you have to be obviously in the right role for that, which is interesting how like the whole idea of like influencers have blown up. And it's like how many, like the people who are actually really successful, those are probably the real influencers, right? Because everybody thinks of an influencer because they can sell something on the internet, but it's like, are you really an influencer, or, you know, did you just happen to, you know, whatever. But the people who do that, who are really successful for years and years and years, you're like, oh, you are actually an influencer. And like, those people are like the ones who are standing out in my mind for like, not just like the big names, but people who have big names and, you know, substantial stuff that they do sell, but also just kind of that like impact on people, you know, like you're like, damn, whatever that person's got, I'm getting like whatever that is that they're packaging. It might not even be a product, you know, it could just be a mindset or an idea.
It's an idea, 100%.
Like a theory that you're like, oh my gosh, I'm totally getting behind this with that person. So yeah, anyways, that was where my mind was going like, what are the statistics on these people? Of course.
Yeah.
Totally irrelevant things. I got to know. But anything else you want to add or?
No, this is great. I mean, I hope that people do embrace this and go and take the test and think about who you are. And
I'll put that in the show notes.
And communicate your needs based on this, especially in any aspect. And, you know, when we think about it from the training industry, is communicate that to your other trainers. Hey, I'm really great at these things. So if you have clients that are struggling here, send them to me. Let me help you. Let me get this together, right? And those are things that I think as in the industry, you can lean on each other and you actually will realize it's not competition at that point. It is support.
Yes, we're all trying to help people, right? But we all can do 100%. That in a very different capacity. And that's another thing that I've learned. And part of that's just maturity, right? Like I think you go through kind of the industry because there are, to be fair, a lot of shitty coaches, right? There's a lot of shitty practices. So I don't want to stand behind that. But I've also recognized that there's, outside of those examples, there are so many great coaches who are maybe just doing different approaches. And those approaches work for their clients because their clients are different types of people, right? So it's like most people are trying to move things forward in a positive way, right? There's a handful of people who aren't. They usually weed themselves out. Most people are. It just happens to be maybe a different approach than you would use and maybe different methods, but that might work for those individuals. So yeah, I love that, leaning on people in the industry. And yes, I will put this in the show notes, Clifton StrengthFinders. So if you guys like this week's episode, please share it. This is the best way that you can support our show. To check out our coaching services, additional content we put out, etc., you can visit teamlocofit.com and follow us on Instagram at teamlocofit. We'll talk to you guys next week.